Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. The very first item on the agenda is a proclamation for Black History Month. Sam, could you join me? That was for the camera. We already said hi earlier. I was making fun of his beard, but. All right, this is a proclamation for Black History Month, February 2020. Whereas Black History Month is an annual celebration of achievements by African Americans and a time for recognizing the central role of blacks in U.S. history. Americans have recognized Black History Month annually since 1926. And whereas the year 2020 marks the centennial of the 19th Amendment and the culmination of the women's suffrage movement. The year 2020 also marks the sesquicentennial, yeah, there we go. I should have read this first, of the 15th Amendment, 1870, and the right of black men to the ballot after the Civil War. And whereas Black History Month is a time for all Americans to reflect and celebrate the contributions that African Americans have made in their struggles for freedom and equality, therefore deepening our understanding of our nation's history. Now therefore be resolved that with the support of the City Council, I, Robert E. Brucci II, Mayor of the City of Hagerstown, Maryland, do hereby proclaim and recognize February 2020 to be Black History Month and encourage all citizens to join us in celebrating the diversity and character of our community and highlighting the importance of sharing our culture, customs, and traditions with those around us.
Thank you.
You want to say a few words?
Yeah. I'd like to thank Mayor and Council for this proclamation. And in the future here, we are, in the NAACP, we are starting to meet at 49 North Walnut Street, and our time will be 7 o'clock, and we want to kick it off the first day of spring, that'll be the 21st. And we are going to be having voters registration, and we are going to have asking a few of the council and mayor to come in and go over some of the referendum that's coming up and also the amendments. And so we want to work together and showing that we can have a positive coming out of Hagerstown, Maryland. And that, what I would thank you and all for this proclamation.
So that's at the corner of Franklin and Walnut. Okay. Thank you, Sam.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Sam. Mayor.
We're not done.
License agreement with Point Broad, I'm sorry.
Neighborhoods first.
Oh, neighborhoods first month. Man.
Yeah.
Were you at the Stevens County this morning? The new stores at the mall provide the ladies something to do.
He said we and the ladies. It can include we.
Okay.
No one else said he did either.
All right, so I've got a lot of proclamations to hand out. I'm only going to read one. The proclamation for Neighborhoods First Month, February 2020. Whereas the purpose of Neighborhoods First is to create a venue for neighborhood-based citizen groups to engage and collaborate with local government and community building and placemaking. And whereas Neighborhoods First provides an effective mechanism whereby the residents of Hagerstown, sharing common neighborhood identity, goals, and concerns, may form groups that are officially recognized by the city and work in partnership with the city to plan and implement neighborhood-based events and projects which contribute to the livability and sustainability of their unique communities. And whereas February is the 23rd anniversary of the organization of Neighborhoods First program, and whereas residents in neighborhoods throughout the city have formed Neighborhoods First groups, Now therefore be resolved that with support of the City Council, I, Robert E. Brucci II, Mayor of the City of Hagerstown, Maryland, do hereby proclaim and recognize February 2020 to be Neighborhood's First Month. Who wants to be the spokesperson? Someone.
I think I just speak on city staff. We're very thankful for these groups for the perspective they bring to the city from the community and of our residents to help us identify projects and different programs to make this a better community to live and work and explore. So thank you to all of our different groups.
And everybody, proclamation. All right, so we all, Eric, what do you want to say? Want to just
Yeah, maybe we
hang
can,
out, kind of like squish you in here?
yeah, try to squish
Okay.
it.
Try to squish you in here a little bit.
Hanging out behind me, so.
So here we go. Good smiles.
You wanna look at the camera, Sam?
Smile, cheese. 1, 2, 3. Okay, got it.
I will say that, when Neighborhoods first came about, Lou and I were around, and we, it was a brainchild, actually, administration prior to mine in 1997, under Steve Sager's administration. And we've had great success in neighborhoods. If you look and you see the improvements that have happened in a neighborhood, no, it didn't come from us. I mean, we helped, but it came from Neighborhoods First groups who have taken that initiative to realize what they want to see in their neighborhood. They come to the city and they work with us, and then we put together a plan and we execute that, and then it all turns out great. So I know there was a Neighborhoods First group up in the West End that kind of fell apart. Hopefully we can try to work to get that back together again, because I know that they want to. So anyway, thank you guys very much for all you do. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Until next time, put space in between there. Okay, can I go to here now?
You may.
Okay, all right, I'm gonna go to the next one then, license agreement with Point Broadband. Rodney, Clint, you wanna come up and have a seat?
Hello, everybody. With me this afternoon is Clint Wiley from Hagerstown Fiber. They have a extensive project they want to do in our community here to build a fiber optic network capable of conveying high-speed broadband service throughout the community. So I'm going to let Clint just give you some description of that, and then I have some details of some of the other things here. I'll turn it over to you, Clint.
Great, thank you very much. Most of you kind of know some of the backstory here, but for the last 3 years, we've been building out a fiber optic, high-speed internet service network in Hagerstown. And as a small company, we were self-funded, some small loans and so forth, and it's taken a long time to build that out. We've built out about 20 miles or so of aerial cable line and served a few thousand customers, primarily in the downtown, west end, and parts of the north end. For the last year, we've been working on accelerating that by getting external funding, both equity and debt funding. And that process has been a fairly long one. It started well before some of the issues that may have come up in the late spring with one of the other providers in town. But we've been really working hard to get an investment partner to help us grow faster. About 6 months ago, we finally were able to identify a partner who is willing to invest in Hagerstown. They found Hagerstown to be an appealing place to do this, and I think we've been able to present a positive picture for Hagerstown. And so that's been a 6-month process to get to this point. One of the things that that they want us to be able to do is in certain places, and I should start out, but most of our construction, or all of our construction to this point has been aerial. So we've been attaching to existing poles. Poles in town are either owned by City Light or Verizon for the most part. The goal here is, as we build out the rest of the town, to continue to do that aerially. The point being that that's the most efficient, cost-effective way to build. There are some places, though, in town where we're going to need to dig. If you think about, I think about 7% of the city has underground utilities where there are no poles. So there's no ability to do any sort of aerial construction. Traditional digging is expensive, and in our case, it would be cost prohibitive, and also is intrusive. You know, you're digging in rights of way. You're doing traditional backhoe digging in across roadways. So what we're looking for is the ability, if we need to work with the city to do something called microtrenching. Microtrenching is a method of construction. It's been around for a couple of decades in Europe, and it's really started to take off here in the United States. After Superstorm Sandy in 2013, it became the preferred way to build in New York City. Verizon has used it to deploy FiOS in, I think it's the Bronx, Queens, and maybe Brooklyn. And other communities have started to do this in the last several years. But what it is you basically saw about a 3/4 inch wide cut, and it goes down about 12 inches, and then you vacuum out everything that's sawed out. You then install some microtube, and then run your fiber through that. You backfill with a slurry, and then you put a sealant on top of that. And the idea would be, and let's say a case, I'll use some of the townhomes around Pangbourne as a perfect example, where you've got curb and guttering. You go right down the seam of the gutter, so you're not really disrupting the blacktop at all. And so those are the kind of places we'd be looking to do this. It's less disruptive. It's more cost effective than traditional, trenching and boring. And the advantages to the people who live there are that it's just, we're in and out. There's not a lot of time, not a lot of disruption. There might be some places in town where we would want to do some of this as well, and that would be in a case where if poles were highly congested and we needed to avoid some poles, and if that were the case, we would try to do this in alleys and stay out of the roadways as much as possible. The whole point of the license agreement is to provide a mechanism for protection of the city, so that the city has our warranties and our guarantees here, and you've taken a look at that. The license also is something that is necessary for this investment, and the investment would provide a competitive broadband solution for all of Hagerstown, some of the areas outside of Hagerstown. There's job creation that's associated with this. Several dozen jobs over a period of the next year or two will be generated from this opportunity, and they're long-term jobs. Some of them will be very high-paying jobs.
Could you say that last part again, slower, so people in the back can hear, maybe a little louder? This will create
An employment opportunity, a job
before
opportunity.
that, an alternative.
An alternative broadband solution.
Thank you.
Yes, so there would be,
We have a monopoly.
well,
I didn't
and,
think
and
you would-
that is,
no, it's
and
not.
so, and that's something I can also address that, people have accused the city of a monopoly, and people have said, well, we need somebody to do something. Well, I've raised my hand, and
There you
we've
go.
been trying to do something. And it's not easy. It's not easy to do this. It's expensive, it's risky, and we've taken tremendous amount of risk. And now what we've done is we've gone out and found a partner that will assume some of that risk for us and with us, and help us do this faster. And that's been, that's sort of been the driving force that got us to this point. I think what we can do is something that I think is of huge benefit to the community here, and it will make all providers in this town better.
Well, I know that the conversations that you and I have had over this micro trenching, it sounds like, again, probably 7% or maybe even a little bit less in areas where you just can't hang overhead lines. I mean, it sounds simple. It sounds very, like people will be able to go about their day-to-day business and not be inconvenienced, and I believe that's what everybody looks for.
Well, and not only that, but this license agreement doesn't mean that we can just start trenching, using micro trenching. What it does then is gets us to the point where after we've done our engineering, I can't start the engineering because I don't have the investment until we get this license agreement done. Once we start the engineering, then we'll say, okay, we have some places where we think we'd like to do that. Then we go into the permitting process with the city. And then we work through the permitting process to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the city when we do this. So it's not an agreement that says, hey, let's go give them a blank, right to do this wherever and whenever they want. It just basically lays out the framework for that. And so that's the whole point here, to get to this license agreement, is to get a framework in place that provides our warranties and guarantees, provides the city with some level of comfort with what we're trying to do, and then gets us to the point where once we get the engineering completed, that we go back to Rodney and the rest of the engineering staff and say, here are the permits that we'd like, and let's sit down and work through how we would do this and what makes sense.
I think as people move in from out of town, the key complaint we always hear is we can't believe there's no choice for high-speed internet service, so this will give a lot of people a choice.
It would give a choice. We had a real estate agent call us back in December, and they said they had a family moving here from PG County, and that they wanted to provide us a list of the homes they were looking at, because they would only buy a home in a place that we provided service, because they wanted to make sure they had competition and a choice. Mm-hmm. And they closed on January 30th, and we installed on January 31st. But it was very important, and the word is out. The word is out beyond Washington County, that if you're looking to move to Washington County, there are only very limited locations where you can have competition and choose between two high-speed. And I can't consider Verizon's DSL high-speed anymore. So, it really comes down to you've got cable service, and then where we've been able to build out fiber, you've got that as an alternative. Mm-hmm. I think you're right. That is what we're trying to do, is give the city an opportunity to have a competitive choice.
I hope this goes very well, and
So
the only comment I have reading through the license agreement, it says that the design specifications shall be approved on a case-by-case basis as you encounter an area where you have to do the micro trenching. I'm hoping that we can get to a point where there's enough experience with this that when we have to go down a curbside, or there's a specific thing that we've done 15 times before, that it's not a whole engineering drill and it's not a delay, that we've got there's a option A, option B, option C. Now, if the option D comes along and we've never done that before, then we should do the engineering study and find out what's going to happen. But hopefully the permitting and execution are not a massive delay between the two entities.
Right. We asked them to put together a detail of the trench in a street, in an alley, and then when it goes into the sidewalks, because as it leaves the street and goes into the properties, they'll have to cross the sidewalks. Mm-hmm. Once we have those details, they can use those wherever it's needed. Mm-hmm. But to be honest, we have never had this technology. Mm-hmm. Talked to a lot of people that it is very new. So we don't even have a detail or a approved method of doing this. So that's why I'm putting that on them to provide that detail.
Mm-hmm. And we will. And we'll work together to try to get this done as efficiently as possible. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the intent here is to go very fast.
Well, so, as far as everybody I read on social media can't go fast enough.
No. I mean, we're already looking at warehouse space for 2 years, because that's the outer limit of with they expect to be able to, they want to build this fast. So the intent is to move quickly. And so what we're trying to do is avoid any kind of hiccups or holdups. It doesn't mean that, and by fast, it doesn't mean that we will do it in a way that's sloppy. It just means that there's going to be a lot of effort put into building this. There's the financing behind it, and quite honestly, the ability to recoup that financing is contingent on building this quickly.
I like the fact that we're on the cutting edge, you know, I can understand the hesitancy and a little bit of nervousness about, oh my gosh, you know, we're usually comparing like cities and municipalities and counties and what do they do, but
Right.
this time, we get to be like a cutting edge kind of technology. I think that's awesome.
Right.
Good for you for being like so persistent and, you know, standing up, and I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that as well, and your comments. And that's why we're working to provide a warranty, you know, so that if this is so new, and it's not so new that we're the first ones to do it, but if there is an issue, you know, we're going to address it, we're going to fix it, it's going to be on us to fix it, and we're going to make that right. You know, I was saying before this, I live here, if I'm sitting at the Broad Axe having a burger and a beer and I look across and I see Scott, I don't want to, like, you know.
Try to hide.
Right, exactly, I don't want to be, you know,
Rodney
eating
would
like
be
this. Right. Or any of you, you know.
We put a lot of effort into this license agreement over the last few weeks. It is structured that basically if we need to do work, they'll move it at their cost. And again, as Clint said it very well, the agreement kind of lays the basis for how they're going to do this, and kind of opens the door to give them that option of using micro-trenching whenever they need to. So we have it in your packet and later on the agenda to approve that license agreement.
Yep.
And that would get the whole process started if you're willing to do that.
We'll get everything else taken care of after the meeting.
And Bob, I want to thank Bob as well. He sort of put us all together on a conference call to sort of hash out some of the last remaining details and get us to the finish line. And I want to publicly thank you for that.
It's worth it, trust me. I know what my citizens have been asking for.
Right. Well, and I appreciate the time from all of you as well. And if you have any questions for me, either now or after all of this, as we get into it, you feel free to always reach out to me. I'm always available.
Thank you.
And you know, as I said, we want to do what we think is a good thing for this community. I've been trying for several years to do this, and now we've got an opportunity to really move it faster.
Yeah, awesome.
Any other questions for Clint?
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for being a customer. I appreciate that too.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Thanks.
Looks like Main Street Hagerstown program update. Caitlin Bell. No cookies in the box.
No cookies. I told you, I'll remember next time, but for
Okay.
now, just a lot of handouts. So, these are copies of the presentation that'll be up on the screen.
Thank you.
And then these are some handouts that will also be available at our open house tomorrow.
Oh, they're nifty.
Oh, I got a couple paper cuts putting these together.
Oh, thank you. Oh, you're so nifty.
No wonder.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Today I'll be presenting an update on Main Street Hagerstown, where we stand now and what 2020 or 2019 accomplishments we have and what it's looking like going into 2020. So if you're new to Main Street, have never heard of it before, a quick introduction is that Main Street Hagerstown aims to protect our historic character, strengthen our business community, respect the environment, promote gathering spaces for friends and family, and hold outstanding events, some of which you'll hear about today. The City of Hagerstown has been a designated Main Street community since October 2014, and it launched in spring of 2015. And since then, there have been thousands of volunteer hours put into this program to make great community events happen. There is a 5-point approach to Main Street. Nationally, it started with 4, but in 2008, the last 5th approach was put into effect. The first one is organization, which assembles the volunteer resources and develops methods to secure additional funding for Main Street projects. Promotion markets the district's unique characteristics to shoppers, visitors, new businesses, investors, and it helps create more exciting events downtown. Design helps to capitalize on downtown's historic buildings and pedestrian-oriented streets to create an inviting downtown atmosphere. Business relations strengthens downtown's existing economic assets while expanding and diversifying its economic base. And the fifth newest committee, and 5-point, is our Clean, Safe, and Green program, which enhances the sustainability and safety of downtown. We will go into our 2019 accomplishments, which was all made possible by our dedicated volunteers and all of the help through the city staff and even the county. The first thing that I would like to talk about is our second annual Sweets on the Streets, which always happens early in the year, normally around springtime. It happens in conjunction with the St. Patty's Day Run Fest, so we have a decent amount of people downtown roaming the streets on that Saturday. And even though it might not seem like a normal fit where you have runners downtown then going to a sweets vendor, it actually has worked really, really well for us, so much so that we're putting on our third annual one, March 14th, which is still in conjunction with Run Fest, and we are currently accepting vendors for that. Our second event that has just become a great, fantastic piece of downtown and backing our German heritage is the third annual Christkindl Market. This year we did have some cold weather and some raininess, but we still had a great turnout over our very first two-day weekend. It was a Saturday and Sunday after Thanksgiving. And despite it being after a holiday and it being rainy, we still had over 40 vendors, including food and craft, and we've already had at least 10 emails saying, hey, can I apply now? Even though it's a little down the road, but we're gonna keep those people ready to go when we make that decision to make the dates for December. Next is the great work of our Business Relations Committee, who has conducted a student focus group where we got some great answers and surveys from our HCC and USMH students. A variety of topics were discussed, such as, but not limited to, downtown perspective, public safety, popular areas to visit, what they would like to see from Hagerstown in the future, such as activities or improvements, a list of social activities that they want to see in the future, and how best to communicate with them and their demographic. We continued to promote the Open for Business campaign that helped to market our downtown businesses and events during the period of construction. When there was road closures, some people assumed that maybe that activity on that side of the road wasn't happening. So we really tried to promote these posters that are still seen downtown to say we are still open for business, don't mind the construction that's making our awesome Maryland Theater expansion happen, as well as the Barbara Ingram expansion. Please still come downtown and have a great time dining, shopping, and finding your entertainment. We conducted 8 grant-funded business seminars, anything from tax planning with Saunders to a 101 of what every business owner should know. This was a great turnout, and we held it at the 60 West Washington Borough Box location that is also run by the city. Our business relations coordination team also provided outreach through business visits, and their job is to go downtown and talk to businesses and see what we can help them with. Anything from they want to get involved into events, as to they'd also like to become a part of our Main Street team. We also organized and promoted a trivia night. We had 18 events held in 18 weeks. And it was a great coordination between the city of Hagerstown as well as the businesses downtown. So we went to Jerry's Subs, Bulls and Bears, 28 South, Flying Camel, Pretzel and Pizza, and the Gourmet Goats. And we had on average at least 20 people attend each of those events. A great thing that we are going to be planning here soon is our spring downtown cleanup and green up, where community members, Main Street volunteers, and city staff organized flower planting and cleanup activities on East Franklin. And as you can see in the photos, it's absolutely beautiful, so we look forward to continuing to do this in the years to come. We also supported the alignment of the Main Street Hagerstown to Keep America Beautiful program, which is a requirement by the state of Maryland. So we now have a logo that says Keep America Beautiful on the bottom. And this is a big part of our Clean, Safe, and Green team, as well as our Adopt a Block program, which I will talk about a little later in the presentation. So now that we're designated, we are aligning what we do to the Keep America Beautiful as well. We held a volunteer appreciation for everything that our volunteers do, whether it's attending the meetings once a month, or if they're on multiple meetings, as to also helping our events happen and run seamlessly. So we really wanted to thank them for all of their help and assistance, because they truly are donating all of their free time, if they have any. We have a lot of business owners who have been involved in the past, and it's hard for them to have free time, and they still put in an effort to volunteer, and it's very much appreciated. At the same time, we held it as a recruitment event, and we are having another one tomorrow, which I'll also talk about. Adopt a Block launched in 2019 through Main Street, and it's a really great opportunity as a part of our Clean, Safe, and Green and Keep America Beautiful to give community members and businesses the chance to adopt a block and clean it. So we have them commit to 6 cleanups throughout the year, in which the first business to do that was Triad Engineering. And after they completed their 6 cleanups, which is very noticeable and very much appreciated, they have 2 designated signs, one on North Potomac, one on South Potomac, both centering towards the city center on that street. And you can see they're standing by their picture in front of Cannon Coffee. Their sign is officially up there, so we are looking for new businesses and new community members to fill out applications to become a part of our Adopt a Block program and clean some more blocks. We held 7 downtown business forums on timely topics. We had Mark Halsey from USMH, Dana Jenkins from REACH, representatives from WCPS, our very own Scott Nice-Warner, Kitty Clark and Audrey Vargason, Jerry Kendall, who's a member of our Clean, Safe, and Green, as well as Jessica Green from the Maryland Theater. With all of these events, outside of that, we have monthly meetings, at least one a week, for the variety of committees that we have. And in just through those meetings, our volunteers donated over 300 hours of their time to make planning and events happen for Main Street, all in 2019. Looking ahead, we're going to start tomorrow. We have an open house held at the Borough Box, 60 West Washington. And it's going to be a great time for people to stop by, grab and go if they need to, or stand around for some communications about what's going to be happening in the future. And it's really a point to just talk about the revitalization of Main Street. We really want to get some more volunteers involved, because the more people we have, the better we can do downtown. So I'm inviting anyone here, anyone listening, anyone who's seen it in the press or online or on Facebook to come, even if it's just for 5 minutes, to pick up some handouts, because Main Street can do some really good things. And as it says, we are all better together, and Hagerstown can be better with all of our help. If anyone would like to get involved, whether it is volunteering at an event or volunteering on a committee, you can absolutely stop by tomorrow at the open house and speak with me. You can sign up on our website by emailing me or reaching out on our social media. All right. Does anyone have any questions?
Some of the information from the surveys, like the Business Relations Committee that pulled together information from the HCC students and the USMH, is that available anywhere? Do you
Yes,
have that published?
Jill and I believe we're going to be planning a director's meeting to go over those, and I think I've sent it to HPD at some point to talk about how USMH students are feeling about the blue lights, and that's just one of the things they mentioned, but that will become available for everybody here soon.
Great.
Is there going to be a concentration on the social media aspect of Main Street? Because I know that's a presence that we're lacking. I see other competing cities and have a strong presence. So is that going to be, is that part of some of the committees that are on Main Street now? Is there like a social media, public relations type of thing?
Absolutely. I think each of our committees has a say in what they want to put on social media to help market what their vision is. And I think especially tomorrow at our recruitment event, I'm really hoping to get voices of all demographics. And I want, young, I want older, I want to see what they want to see on social media, so we know how to best offer them information and how to promote what we're doing. So I think continued work on social media, marketing it, holding more events, posting on our stories, YouTube videos, the limit is endless.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Kate.
Thanks, Caitlin.
budget status review. Let me get comfortable, Michelle. Hang on.
I know.
I feel like I haven't seen you for a while.
Well, hello. I'm here this evening. So just as a reminder, before we get started, this is I don't want to say very early in our budget cycle because our department managers and our departments have been very diligent and have entered all of their initial requests. Scott, as his first year as city administrator, got to pretty much block 3 weeks off of his calendar during the month of January, where we have sat and actually reviewed with each of the department their operating budgets as well as their 5-year plan for their capital improvement projects. So now that all of that has been entered in the computer system, we have stopped long enough to run some reports and give you a snapshot of where we currently are. And then through the next couple of weeks, myself, Brooke Garver, who is here this evening, and I'm happy to say is our new accounting and budget manager. She was recently promoted, and Scott. The three of us make up by position the budget committee, so over the next couple of weeks, we'll be working to get this balanced, and then the remainder of the time, in the month of February and all of March, the accounting and finance department will work on getting the entire budget document together, so that by March 31st, at the end of the day, the documents will be available and the general fund will be balanced. So with that said, everybody's anxious to see where we're currently sitting in fiscal year 21. Again, this is a snapshot, not where we will end. But as of last Monday, about a week ago, we were at an approximate $3.8 million deficit in the general fund. And on page 2 of the packet, just to give you a brief overview, for fiscal year 21, currently in the budget, we're looking at approximately $47.9 million in revenue. The really good news is that represents a growth over current fiscal year 20 budget, as well as growth over where we're currently expecting to end fiscal year 20. On the expense side, we're looking at right now $52.9 million in expenses, which when expenses exceed revenue, it's why I'm reporting a current deficit, but again, those will be balanced by the time we come back, March 31st. Just to kind of walk through a couple of the big areas. So for fiscal year 21, had a very good meeting with the local state Department of Assessment and Taxation Office. Received some good news that as of right now, fiscal year 21 will be our first year of our new triennial reassessment. So for the first time in the last 3, we are looking at having a growth. Now, we do not yet have our constant yield tax memo, and sometimes when we receive that, when the state includes what they currently estimate for appeals and abatements, that growth looks a little bit smaller. But where we currently are is about a 4% increase for real estate, only slight increase in corporate personal property. And that's because in the current year, fiscal year 20, we're trending well below our fiscal year 19 levels in corporate personal property. And then with the increase in the real estate side, we will see increases in discounts, adjustments, homestead tax credits. So overall, from one budget year to the next, looking at about $1 million increase with where we're currently at. Income and other taxes, I just want to take a moment. I know the dollar difference that we're currently showing on this chart from fiscal year 21 budget to fiscal year 20 is only slight. It's a $54,000 decrease. But I do want to mention a couple of quick things. Under income and other taxes is where we find things like state income tax money that we receive. As a reminder, throughout the state, counties are allowed to set those rates. So Washington County, for the first time, has adjusted that from a 2.8% local up to the maximum of 3.2%, and that went into effect January 1 of this calendar year. So I'm sure as many of you have seen, as well as our employees, there's been an increased amount in what comes off of their paycheck for this, and the hope is it will represent almost close to $350,000 additional revenue for us in the next year. Admissions and amusement tax is also part of this category, and unfortunately, our admissions and amusement tax is trending in the complete opposite direction. It is probably about a 50% decrease over several prior years. One of the largest contributing factors is with admissions and amusement, of course, in the A&E district that's exempt, but places like Cancun Cantina, which used to be open and charged admission, was one of the largest reasons we're seeing this declining trend, because there's really few and far between places that are open in the city of Hagerstown that charge for such an event. Last but not least, when we did fiscal year 20 budget, I included highway user dollars in the general fund to cover annual debt service requirements for projects where we had to bond money instead of being able to use highway user dollars. And that was about $275,000 in fiscal year 20. Once we finalize all of the capital improvement projects, as well as funding sources for bond issues, more than likely I will include some in fiscal year 21. There's just none in there right now. Big differences, I won't go line by line in these charts again because it is a snapshot and not what we will end and be when I come back on March 31st. But important to mention, fund balance reserve, there is about $800,000 currently sitting in the numbers that's reflected in these charts. About $700,000 of that is from being utilized from our fiscal year 19 surplus, but the other $100,000, we had several projects, two specifically where we had already approved in prior year's budget. One was fiscal year 19, one was fiscal year 18, that we were going to use fund balance reserve. So those projects, timing-wise, did not occur, so we put them back into budget. More than likely, though, by the time I come back on March the 31st, I'm anticipating using another $800,000 to $1.6 million in fund balance reserve, which is a very high number and something I typically don't do. But $800, we are looking at doing some improvements over on Basil Boulevard for road and infrastructure, and one of the things we're going to do is be able to utilize and hopefully see some future offsetting revenues. And in order to make that happen, I'm going to use fund balance reserves with the plan that those future revenue dollars will replenish that. And then looking at probably trying to save some of our CIP requests currently to the tune of about another $800,000 if we possibly can. Salary enhancements, so of course one of the biggest numbers you're going to see on the chart, one of the biggest differences between fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 20 was in the category of salary, wages, and benefits. And that's because right now all 4 collective bargaining units have a wage reopener in place that would be effective for fiscal year 21. So what is included in those numbers is that all full-time groups, union, non-union, would have some type of dollar enhancements that are included. The dollar enhancements could be a representation of a COLA, a step, or some type of combination of a salary table adjustment. But again, we have money in there right now for all the groups to have a salary enhancement, but we are sitting with a $3.8 million deficit. And unfortunately, you know, I look at my boss and I say, it's the largest dollar increase over the prior fiscal year 20 budget. Realistically, we're probably not in a position to leave in everything that is in. So those will more than likely be adjusted by the time we come back. And then minimum wage. So minimum wage changed effective January 1 to $11, and it is right now scheduled to increase to $11.75 next January. And again, that's supposed to get to $15 over the next several fiscal years. There's about 457 full-time positions, and 325 of those are in the general fund, 132 are in all the other funds across the city. There are no reductions in staffing that were included in the numbers right now, as you see. Benefits is another area of dollar increase fiscal year 21 over fiscal year 20. Very fortunately for us, health insurance, the current year projections are that there will be no increase over our current levels, which is a tremendous thing to be able to sit at the table to say. And that is relying on trends and relying on our third-party administrator, CBIZ, to provide us those numbers. But even though there's no projected increase, the dollars still are significant in the general fund. So total in the general fund, about $4.6 million is health insurance related costs. 3.2 million of that is for active employees, but 1.4 million represents retirees from the general fund. That is about 44% of the total. So when you start to get to the point where your health insurance costs are growing on a retiree side at the level that there's soon going to be about a 50-50 split, more than likely we're going to be coming back with some type of recommendations, suggestions, things that we need to find a way to do better, because healthcare trends are definitely on a national level increasing. Dental insurance, again, projected to be flat as $140,000 total in the general fund, and that's for all active and retirees. 140,000, 4.6 million. It's quite significant. Police and fire pension. So there's no changes currently in the percentage of contributions that was included. And as a reminder, the city of Hagerstown contributes 14%, and we've had that level in place and haven't changed it since fiscal year 19, so this would be the third year in a row. And the employee contribution right now, when we brought the numbers, is 8%. That total dollar in the general fund is $1.7 million. State of Maryland pension. So when we look across the city, the state of Maryland pension is for all other employee groups minus your sworn police and fire, and represents about a 51% in the general fund, 49% in all other funds. We get the numbers from the state of Maryland. They mandate both what the employee will contribute as well as what the employer will contribute, and we are looking to see about a 9.2% increase. Total dollars in the general fund side is $900,000, and the numbers that are reflected currently. And last but not least, on the benefit side, is our workers' comp funding. So at the time, we went self-insured, and we will soon be hitting our 5th year. We had a projection from CBIZ, a funding plan. So I should say funding. This represents our funding. About a 10-year funding plan, and we committed, this group and this body committed to ensure that we funded at the levels of which they recommended, even if our claims came in lower. And we guaranteed to do that because, again, being self-insured, you have one workers' comp claim, it could be enough to, create a deficit in a workers' comp fund. So when we asked and looked and had an actuary involved and we had new projections done, the fiscal year 21 was increased by almost $500,000 over where they were originally projected, and that is about an additional $327,000 jump in the general fund, which is fairly significant. Our capital improvement projects, again, capital improvement projects, we've got a lot of projects with many, many different funding sources. The items that really, from a CIP side, impact the general fund dollars as you currently see them reflected in the charts, are anything that we are going to do through PAYGO funds. A lot of people say PAYGO. Just simply means our current fiscal year 21 money that we will be receiving, we will transfer it to the CIP to pay for items. That was the initial request come in at $2.5 million. To give you a little bit of a breakdown, about $878,000 of that was for vehicles for all departments in the general fund. About $345,000 for public safety equipment like radios and cameras. $290,000 for public safety building renovations. And a remaining balance of about $987,000 that was across all other categories, including items that needed matching funds. And again, we're talking about areas like parks, engineering, information technology, or IT. One of the other things is bond-funded projects. So bond-funded projects impact the general fund in the manner of annual debt service requirements. So at the time of entry, we were looking at about a little over $6 million, close to $7 million in bond-funded projects. The breakdown, the majority of the items are different and a variety of requests from fire to the tune of about 5.4 million. All other infrastructure and vehicle requests, 1.4 million. Last but not least, in the CIP fund, we have projects. We have several projects like in IT, when we talk about items like PEG fees, when we talk about certain projects that had restricted funding sources, and we have not finished those items. We carry that funding forward so those projects can be finished, and that is about $500,000 right now. Whew. Anybody else tired? City services, just miscellaneous. So when we started this, we did not assume any changes in staffing. We didn't include any additional increase in staffing. We did not assume or include any reduction or changes to city services, no changes in recreation, public safety, public works, or even the golf course. One of the big things that I probably should have mentioned on the chart, when we looked at it, I had a number in blue, and that has to do with everything currently in the general fund on the operating side that is storm water related. That amounts to about 1.2 million in direct operating expenses. If a stormwater program does not move forward or we do not implement it, we would need to identify and find a way to fund that money. Of the 1.2 million, there's about 400,000 that could be deferred, meaning we included some new items for stormwater if we move forward and implement a program. But otherwise, the remaining balance in the operating plus about $2 million on the capital projects side, we would need to identify something else. Rodney and other staff will be back in like 2 weeks, February 18th, at a work session, just to continue the conversation and next steps for stormwater program. Agency contributions, typically agency contributions from the general fund are capped at $205,000. When I came in October and we had a discussion and a debate, we, for the first time, set a range, anywhere from $205,000 to $284,600. As of right now, it's $284,600, but with the current numbers that we have in place, I realistically do not think that's going to be what I bring back when we balance the budget. I just don't know how to do it. ICE rank, there have been some preliminary conversations on a second sheet of ICE, and while there's no specific impact in fiscal year 21, I did just want to mention, because again, there have been conversations, there is monies when we start to look at the CIP, it is included in fiscal year 25. A multi-use facility, there's no dollar amounts in the fiscal year 21 budget for a renovation of a building or a new construction of a multi-use facility. The only thing multi-use facility, stadium-related, that's included in these numbers is $35,000, and that represents our current contract lease that will expire in fiscal year 21. There will be additional conversations and discussions, I think, sometime in February as well, doing another work session on next steps and status there. Cable franchise revenue. So when we talked about the revenue pieces, cable franchise revenue is under the category of service charges, and right now there's approximately $150,000 less in fiscal year 21 than in prior years because there's new legislation in place and we're just uncertain what the results may be. Realistically, more than likely, we're probably going to be adding that back in and hope that we continue to receive the same current funding amount. Last but not least, there's $400,000 in expenses underneath HPD for 911 services that we pay to the county. Incentives, we've included $1.2 million in transfers from the general fund to the economic redevelopment fund, And the original breakdown was gonna be about 200,000 for general incentives, PEP, which is our Partners in Economic Progress, which has subsidized rental assistance as well as grant-back taxes. Some sign and facade grants. This is a little bit more than the fiscal year 20 funding. And then the second piece of that would leave $1 million for the Invest Hagerstown grant program. Again, with where we're currently sitting realistically, I know that this is a goal, and I know we want to see that number continue to grow and get higher. I just don't know that it's going to be at that level. When we look at the tax rate increase that we put in place back in fiscal year 19, and the growth that we have anticipated, it would be about $820,000 in gross revenue in those category. And then I've included a very brief chart so that in fiscal year 19, you can see that we had $550,000. All of that had been obligated, but we recently just received notification that one of the recipients for the citywide grant wasn't moving forward with the project, so now that money is available for Jill and her group to reutilize or repurpose for another eligible applicant. Fiscal year 20 funding was $800,000, and so far, $502,000 of that is obligated and/or reimbursed out to the vendors. I've included very summary, high-level information on the three major utility funds which would be our electric, water, and wastewater. But big bullets there. Really, there's not a whole lot of change. Water and wastewater has a 5-year cost rate plan in place. Fiscal year 21 will be the second year. Water rates are looking to increase 3%, wastewater 2%. We will have an electric purchase power agreement in place until fiscal year 24. And then at that point, we're looking at a potential decrease. The only other big thing difference-wise is in water and wastewater. They're working on a study to look at capital equipment needs. And then also a risk and resiliency. It's an EPA mandate, so there's a lot more that they've included in the operating side that they have to do as a result of that. But overall, again, things are pretty status quo for electric, water, and wastewater. No big changes. Again, no changes in staffing. Same on all the benefits and wage size with those union groups. Any questions? How about, is there anything that you would like to say to Scott that is off the table or on the table for what we can or cannot do? That absolutely, positively, beyond no shadow of a doubt, please don't put it in. Don't take it out.
I think that the numbers you provided are actually a fairly positive picture. I know we look at that and we see that figure, and that's the first and only thing that'll probably be reported, tomorrow is, here's how much we're short right now. But, sitting here for some time and I'd like to think I'm somewhat familiar with the budgetary process. At this point, I think that there are some areas that you have emphasized that will likely not come to pass on the expense side. And I think that the numbers that we may expect to see on the revenue side, and that's why I say it's fairly positive, I think for the first in some time are going to be more positive than we expect. For me, I'd still like to see work, move forward on the stormwater management fee structure. I also think that we need to give some further consideration of the utility tax figure. And I think that, in concert with the utility tax figure, I think we need to look at maybe an equivalent adjustment downward on the business personal property tax to maybe generate some greater interest, because I know that, for those entities that hold a lot of stuff, you know, that is a detractant. And so I think that that's something that, you know, we could offset a little and gain a little, and, you know, and create some incentive there. In terms of, you know, anything being off the table, for me, there's nothing that's, you know, an absolute on this, and I don't pretend to focus too heavily on, you know, those later items you mentioned, like an ice rink or a multi-use facility or a stadium, because I just don't, you know, I don't think that they're in the cards of discussion of the budget that we need to create and adopt and implement for this year. I think that the wage and benefit discussion, as always, you know, takes significantly greater precedent and importance over those things, especially with, you know, the reopeners and the analysis that was recently conducted that, you know, employees and groups are already gravitating toward. You know, I try and recognize those with a bit of a grain of salt, to the degree that I recognize as well what the affordability level of our citizens, you know, are. You know, I think that we have to be cognizant of that. It is unfortunate that we continue to struggle to some degree to find common ground on the specific issue of fire and rescue and EMS services with the county, and the, you know, the level that we bring as it applies to that service, comparable to other municipalities, and the absence of recognition financially for voluntarily doing so. And so I think that's probably a bigger conversation over the course of the next year that I think we have to have with the county. You know, it makes up roughly 30% of the total property tax that we collect. It is our second largest expense. It is our second largest impact to revenue and expense adjustments in every budget that we look at, and to not acknowledge that as a significant impact, you know, to budget stability is you know, as equally negligible to not acknowledge, you know, the housing market impact to our revenue and expense. So.
I agree about the tax differential.
Yeah, I would be concerned right now about any discussions of cutting personal property tax, though, given some of the discussions we've had recently in executive session about potential economic development projects around here. If I am reading that correctly, we can always use it as an incentive if we need to, but I don't know that I'd be doing that right now.
I have interested in exploring the utility tax again, though. Haven't really talked about that too much, so.
Yeah, I mean, I
Otherwise,
think,
agree, Kristen.
I think the utility tax was a way to get that 800 and some thousand to an even million, so that we have that even million to
Right.
invest in other economic
Yeah.
development, which in turn helps those utilities make more money selling their utility implements.
I'm still interested in exploring a pilot, payment in lieu of property taxes for the growing number of nonprofit entities downtown that use fire, police, other city services, but do not fund any of that. And I think if we're gonna keep going that way, more and more buildings that are not paying property tax, we're gonna need to figure out how to make everybody kind of pay their fair share.
Okay. Sounds good. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Next up are amendments to City Code, Chapter 173, Peace and Good Order. The discussion on this stems from conversation that I had with the higher echelon of HPD. And as I went through chapter 173, peace and good order, particularly the ones that I highlighted that gave you guys before, some of those in there we know are outdated, and the code should be amended to reflect that. Some of those in there, we do use and should use when it comes to controlling peace and good order. And so the discussion, and I guess, Jason, you received a copy of this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So our attorney's here to make sure that we're not stepping on people's constitutional rights. With some of the ones that are interesting, you know, we have citizens every day who come up to us or email us or message us about, you know, soliciting in certain areas and how they're uncomfortable. Usually it's on private property, much like the old Ames Shopping Center or places like that. Martin is out at Vasel, so we know that it's, you know, we have an ordinance that is soliciting and aggressive soliciting, and what aggressive soliciting states, and that we have deemed, and Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, as being well within our rights to have that.
Mr. Mayor, I think a discussion about the code and revisions to it, particularly the legality of some of these provisions. And you started off your discussion saying that some of this may be outdated.
Mm-hmm.
It is better off, I think, to have in a closed session, and I think it's better off if we had HPD participating in that, since they're gonna be the ones enforcing it. And maybe even including the state's attorney's office, since they're the ones who are gonna decide whether or not to charge somebody, or excuse me, whether to prosecute somebody who's charged with these things. But a number of these things, like when, you know, if you're talking about the soliciting and aggressive, soliciting being sort of hot button issues, you can go through a number of these things and find state code provisions
Almost
in
everything.
the criminal code, yeah. Well,
Almost
we have an expert here already, but.
Well, really, what you need to do is just take chapter 173 and get rid of everything in it except for, one or two things here. I mean, you want to, we did the smoking in public places, for instance. That's something we want not in the parks, those types of things. However, when you look at things like indecent exposure, or assault, or gambling, or defacing property, they're all Maryland state crimes, and they're superseded by the Maryland State Code, and the penalties that we have don't even compare to the penalties of the Maryland Code, which supersede them. And then there's certain things in here that, you know, this whole thing, for instance, on guns, I think you gotta get rid of that, the firearms and other weapons. I personally don't think it's constitutional, all what's in there, but all the.
Profanity.
Well, obviously, the profanity, the saying nasty things to women. Well, you listen, that was good before the Equal Rights Amendment. Now, if you want to say nasty things, it has to be to everybody. But I think what you need to do is take a look at the things that are very specific for the city of Hagerstown, and that's like smoking in public places, open containers, if that's not the law in Maryland. But otherwise, I personally think these things are all basically superseded by by state law.
It's very dated. As you read
Yeah,
through it.
flying of kites,
Blasphemous performances.
Laser beams, I mean, just.
Why can't you fly kites in the park?
I think it's utility wire.
I've always wondered that too, why can't
I thought it was
fly
because of
laser beams?
utility wire.
I have no idea.
How about this, the Pennsylvania Avenue underpass that no longer is an underpass?
Right. There was a time when that was necessary. I guess that's all sealed up now, right?
I think so.
It is.
Now, what about, okay, talk about letting it just supersede to state code, the ones about urinating in the streets and.
Yeah, like that
That's-
catches the
that's-
eye.
Well, that's a state urinating, public is a state
Or
crime.
indecent exposure.
Indecent exposure is a state crime.
Fortune telling's an interesting one. But according to this, when they have those health fairs up at the fairgrounds, those guys are all,
Well, that's the other problem is so many of these things never were enforced.
yeah, this is ancient, and,
I don't even know if you may want to get rid of the entitled chapter 173
Stalking.
and have a whole different name for the chapter, because
We just use the state code, right?
Sure. Well, and there are ones in here such as, you know, no vehicle shall be parked on a street illegally that's kept by, the list is kept by the
No, let me
city
ask
clerk,
you that.
which is double parking and things like that.
what does this do though to HPD? Okay, if HPD is going to try to enforce a violation of our city code, does it just, they have to jump onto a applicable Maryland code?
which is what they do anyway.
Right, and they use the state.
Nobody charges anybody with a city code that's covered by state law.
Yeah, they're not using our tickets
Not at
separately,
all.
I'm assuming. They're probably.
No, what you need to look at.
When we used to issue civil citations for noise ordinance violations and things like that.
Right, and you know, you can put those things in the appropriate places. But I don't even think we have that in here,
No, I don't think that's in
What?
here.
noise.
Noise?
I think it's a whole separate section, right?
Right.
Yeah,
and
it
that-
wasn't under chapter
Right,
170.
and that's what I think we need to have is a whole different chapter for what we want.
Public dancing,
I know.
God forbid.
You can't
Is there a
do
Maryland
that
state
after
law, Lou, on loitering by any
Yeah,
chance?
It's like footloose.
yeah, it covers, sure covers loitering and trespassing.
There's the dangerous elevations one, we just,
Well, we
right here, we just,
just
Yeah, so-
did an exception to
so we
that.
apparently pay attention to it. The dangerous elevation one, 173-5.
That's what we.
Yeah, it's
We just-
interesting,
yeah.
that we have to do that when we didn't have to make any exceptions for the Blues Fest at all, did we? I think there were people dancing in the public.
After
I
it
think
was
there's,
over,
there's quite a bit of public dancing at the Pride Fest too.
can imagine, festival.
Well, Jason, maybe you could do us a favor when it comes to the peace and order under chapter 173 and some of the things that you have highlighted, section there. You could cross-reference with state law and we could amend those for sure, which would, you know, get them out of our charter.
Updating things out.
Yeah.
That'd be fine. I think, again, the vehicle to do that, if we could, would be come back and have a closed session and have that discussion.
But I think it's also important to not just get rid of what is no longer applicable, is superseded, is not constitutional, et cetera, but also, we're gonna have to have a conversation about what it is that we can do that we're trying to address. In other words, I feel like we're looking at this in a manner of saying, hey, how can we apply this to a specific number of items that we receive regular complaints about, that we hear public ire about, that simply are going not only unnoticed, but are increasing in their normalcy within the community, and how can we maybe work to fix that issue? Because as the mayor rightly points out, I don't care where you go, you South End Shopping Center, I've heard the complaints, of individuals that, going to different establishments at South End Shopping Center that say to me, hey, this is why we have parking set up this way, and here's the issues that we have. Or, right down the street from City Hall, we have issues. And so I think the question that you raise is a good one, is that, what are the ways we can address what folks find as an aggressive behavior toward them, and it isn't unique to Hagerstown. I mean, I
Right.
did go to the Walmart, the new Walmart out, Sharpsburg Pike, and you hear stories,
And to do it legally so that we aren't stepping on people's
Right.
constitutional rights. The last thing we want to do is do that. We all know that. But we also know that, under 142-1 for loitering, remaining idle in essentially one location. And then, if you go down to 142-2, unlawful activity, the creator calls to be created a danger or breach of peace. Or creator calls to be created any disturbance or annoyance to the comfort and repose of any person. So when,
Right.
and I know no one wants to hear this at this table, but if you have a group of individuals in an area where we know, and by we, I'm talking about HPD because they know, where certain things may happen at certain times, if somebody and her kids walking by and they feel a danger because of all these individuals standing in an area where certain things happen, then we should have some recourse of, say, listen, whether it's, loitering for, whether it's a time frame. I mean, I don't know. There's got to be something that gives some teeth to HPD to be able to address these issues. And when you talk about, and again, I don't think there's a state law on loitering, but there may be. I know that we passed the ordinance back, and I think we had to get rid of that when we had no loitering outside a drinking establishment within 50 feet or something like that. It was just,
You're impeding.
yeah, the flow of traffic,
Exactly.
foot traffic, yeah.
And a prime example was it Friday? Yeah, Friday evening, well, evening, 1 o'clock in the morning, coming past South End Tavern. I mean, it was the same as always. It was 50 people outside. There were several cars stopped that could not get through, the street. You know what I mean? And there was clearly a fairly loud and disorderly sort of level of activity, and that's a fairly residential,
That's a liquor board issue.
neighborhood. And so, you look at that and go, man, as you're a car, whether you're coming or going from Crumpy's or something, you're like, I'm not driving through that. I'm not stopping. I have a desire to stop through that and wade through whatever process is going on at that moment. And yeah, I think that I think is a reflection of that type of issue where you're like, yeah, you know what? I wouldn't want to live 3 houses down from that.
Exactly, yeah. So I think what needs to happen is to make sure that we're having a conversation that addresses some of those concerns of our citizens, is to make sure that we're not also stepping on people's rights. And I don't know the part about having an executive session. I don't know why that matters. I mean, these are ordinances that are in our charter, I mean, they're already there.
I think, Bob, a lot of your loitering issues deal with our property owners.
Oh, yeah.
And not to sound sarcastic, but that gets right back to the private ownership versus government's right to interfere. But if we could get, HPD will be the first ones to tell you, if people put out no trespassing and no loitering signs, that's how it's enforceable. No, if people are just standing around and not doing anything, and the property owners don't mind them doing it, there's not much you can do about it.
And I think that comes back to, especially in places like out at the old Ames Shopping Center or the South End
Sure.
Shopping or wherever, those individuals, those owners have to be vigilant or the sheet store at
And it's
Cannon
interesting how
and-
vigilant they used to be with the cruisers, but don't seem to be with the panhandlers.
Yeah.
We're always clearing that lot of the cruisers.
Right.
But I don't hear that necessity anymore, so maybe it'd be nice.
So anyway. So let's try to figure out what we can and cannot do. And
We'll get with Jason.
Yep.
Over the next week.
sounds good.
Go through this.
Yeah, take your time. I mean, take,
What's the
take 8
problem?
days.
That's okay. We'll take it. Maybe not.
There's not too many people dancing for.
Okay, I need to get a motion to go to 93rd special session, please.
So moved.
Lou and second Alston.
No, Shelley.
Well, I'm gonna give it to Alston anyway because Lou and Alston moved at the same time, so. All right. Jeez, jeez. Approval
I'll
resolution
say it
for a
again.
license agreement for the
I'll
use
say
of
it
public
again.
right-of-way
That's your
by Point Broadband of the Piedmont.
Mr. Mayor, hereby move for approval of a resolution approving a license agreement for access to and use of the public right-of-way for installation of communication infrastructure. This agreement enables Point to install a fiber optic network within the city and allows Point to utilize micro trenching in the public streets under limited specific conditions.
Second.
Okay, Lou made the motion and Alston seconded. Are we good with that?
You can give it a show.
Any discussion
Mr. Mayor,
that
can I
was
make
not
a
had
comment?
during the, go ahead.
I have a last-minute change to the agreement that Clint agreed to before he had to leave. The work that they do has a warranty of 2 years. So in the section under Exhibit A, under damage, if we are milling a street or putting in a new water line or new storm drain, and we want them to move their micro trench, they do that at their cost. But the way it's written is that they'll do that within the warranty, the 2 years. So effectively, that sunsets the time that they'll move it at no cost to us. So we're suggesting that they remove the words "and" within that warranty, which makes it basically go on in perpetuity. So
That's
Donna
fine.
has the revised version there. But Clint agreed with that before he left.
Good.
Thank you.
If, just, we beat Clint up pretty hard on this. Because Rodney, as Rodney is responsible for the streets, is very diligent in making sure that whatever is going to be cut into the streets is done with quality, is not done to degrade the neighborhood. I think by their doing it on a minimal basis, and by doing it at least initially, case by case, under the auspice of the city engineer's office, I think we'll be fine, and if not, we'll stop it. But the overall opportunity that this presents, I sat over there about 7 years ago now, and this was a goal that several of us had to be able to get to where we would be able to provide high-speed internet to the community. And as we have said time and time again, it's a major infrastructure expense to be able to do this. And we are now finally to the point where we have somebody willing to take that shot. And I think we provide every opportunity to allow them to do it. And I am extremely excited for what the opportunity lies, not only for our residents, but also for economic development to be able to offer this at an affordable price. I was tempted to ask Clinton what that was, but I didn't want to put him on the spot at this point. But it will be at a price that will be very affordable to not only a commercial entity, but also a resident. So thank you for your consideration.
Anybody else? All in favor? Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Imagine that. City Administrator's comments.
Mayor, got a couple things here. Day in Annapolis was last week that the Community Coalition put on. We were well representative. DCED was down there, Caitlin, Doug, and Jill. Very nice crowd. We talked to a lot of people, and I think we got a lot of good information. Washington County is certainly, Hagerstown and Washington County are certainly on the minds of a lot of people down there, and I think it's finally nice to start to see that momentum swing towards Washington County and Western Maryland. So I thank all the council members and staff that went down for that. State of the county was today. I appreciate the words that the county provided as far as our relationship in dealing with with county staff on many issues. There still remain, as Councilman Alshire said, there still remains some pretty serious disagreements between both sides. But we continue to talk, we continue to try to work through some of those, and we will eventually come to, and we will do it sooner than later, come to some sort of a agreement to disagree or an agreement to move forward, and then that'll be left in your hands as how we move forward from there. To reiterate that there, also, the State of the City is March 3rd at the Maryland Theater. Looking forward to that. Thanks to all who are participating in helping Wes and Eric create that. Main Street Open House again at the Borough Box, 4 to 5:30 tomorrow. I'd like to see as many volunteers as, or potential volunteers, news or olds, show up and take part in moving Main Street into what we hope is there is a new direction of nonprofit based operation, which is the way the Main Street organization wants to see these things happen. So we look forward to that. And just on a last note, regarding the budget, I sat on that side for 15 years, working through my department budget and kind of being on the outskirts of overall budget development. Been through initially some of the better times, went through the really, really bad times back about 10 years ago. We're now finally starting to, as Councilman Alshire said, see the positive aspects of it, but we're not there yet. And I appreciate the comment that there is nothing that that is not on the table as far as budgets go. We have to begin taking very hard looks at how we structurally operate government and how and where our money goes and how our taxpayer money is spent. We've said that before, it's been said before, but if we don't do that, we cannot continue to put the directors in positions where they're continually having to take budgets back and cut. We have to get to a point where we're doing things better and we're making better decisions with spending taxpayer dollars. How that is done, again, I have no clue at the moment, but we're going to figure it out. And my goal would be that we don't have to continue to come back here telling you we're at a $3 million deficit. We can tell you we're, either close to balance or, hopefully we've got some room to breathe as far as the money goes. If we have to come back balanced, we will come back balanced. But we may have to do some very unpopular things going forward over the next couple of years. But they will only be done in the better interest of the citizens and the employees. So just wanted to say that. I commend Michelle. I commend everybody that's worked on this budget. It's brutal. I'm not going to lie about that. It's a brutal process. But I'm very proud to be part of it with the folks that are doing it. It's not fun. It's frustrating. But we'll get it done, and we'll give you the best product we can. That's all for me.
I'm going to start timing you, Shelley.
Hey, I've been quiet the last couple of weeks.
Just really quick, in regard to our State of the City, I think there was a suggestion last year to do two, to do one in the morning like the county does and one in the evening. I would really like to do that. I don't know if we're able to do that maybe at Bridge of Life or somewhere that's convenient, but I think that would be beneficial, so.
We're only scheduled for one right now, so if you want to add, just need direction that you want to add a.
I would like to add a second. That's two of us.
We did that before.
We've done.
We did it at the Maryland Theater. We had like 7 people show up.
It's the problem. That's the problem.
Although I don't, and I don't have a problem doing it. I just know that we've done it before, and I'm willing to take a chance and do it again.
I'd just like to make the offer. I mean, even if 7 people show up, knowing that we're transparent and that we're available to talk to. I just think that it's important.
I do too.
I have no problem.
Thanks.
You will.
Thank you.
Make it so, legend.
That's it.
You heard that.
What, that you,
Well, we're gonna figure out where to have it.
yeah, thank you.
No, right.
Austin,
Nothing tonight.
Kristen.
I have one thing, and I sent you guys the email on my thoughts on it, was the folks came, as we probably expected, some folks came and spoke at our most recent regular meeting, individuals that, again, brought up the issue of the activities and use of a property for a clinic by a specific business that, is in the city. I believe one of the individuals at the meeting also presented the clerk with legislation that had been considered and passed in other jurisdictions that essentially, and I didn't get to see, the information, but they've brought this position or argument up before, that we consider that. And to me, it sounds like a fairly simple sort of use oriented item, land use. And as I said, that reminds me of, when we have zoning hearings and we have zoning approvals, and, you ask for consideration of those. And I believe in some instances, that within the zoning code, there are things you can't really come back and ask for a specific period of time, once there's been a position made by the governing body. And so I just sort of simplified it to that degree, and would ask the mayor and council to entertain, we simply consider their request. If the request is the same month to month, that we specifically enact an ordinance or some governmental measure that would preclude or exclude a specific type of business from operating or use from being applied to a property, we simply consider it. I have no interest in supporting the request. I think I've been fairly clear on that. I'm happy for folks to bring any request they want for, consideration to this body, as they rightly should, for our consideration of an action to pass on legislation such as this. I'm happy to entertain the legislation. I would most likely not be in favor of that legislation. And I think that if we simply took a position as an elected body on the legislation that they're proposing, then that would be the end of it. I'm more than welcome to come and talk additionally, but the reality is, once we've acted on that legislative request, then there should be no further opportunity to simply regurgitate something that the current elected body has taken a position on, one way or the other. So,
We got rid of the dirty bookstore and zoned that out of the core of the city of Hagerstown.
we limited that to specific locations within the code.
Yeah.
Well, I have been doing some research on this as well and have some things to bring to the next public session, and was gonna do that same thing, just say, are there 3 people interested in this?
May I suggest that Kristen's idea is a lot more viable than Emily's? And what I mean by that, Emily, is if this is discussed in a work session, we have a discussion about it, we control the discussion. If we do it in a regular session, if it's not a voting item, then what we're doing is putting off this major discussion until council comments, which is after citizen comments, which just invites further rebuttal comments back and forth. I agree with Kristen. I'd like to see it in a work session. I've been trying to avoid back and forth, and that's why I haven't addressed it at the regular session. Listen, these are fine people. I have no negative comments. They have positions that are different than mine, and they have religious beliefs, more importantly, that are different than mine. But I would like to discuss it at a work session. I think that's very appropriate.
We can have it on for the 18th. Okay. All right, that it, Kristen? Emily?
Nothing tonight.
Okay, all right. Yeah. I gotta tell you, I was I was very happy, as Scott touched on, of the county's comments this morning about how our relationship has been. We disagree on some issues when it comes on not only, fire and rescue, but tax differential, those kind of things. Hopefully, we can present a case to them at a certain point in time and see what shakes out after that. But, we are one of 9 municipalities in Washington County, and unfortunately, they treat all 9 of us exactly the same. And we are not exactly the same. But, there has to come a time when we just present facts, and hopefully our facts win the day. So I'm sure we're going to have that conversation coming up with them. So, but they are working very well. I mean, we are working together. We're working together on, moving the MRGA and doing those kind of things. So we have a very good working relationship with the county. So other than that, I don't think I have anything else, so we're adjourned until next Tuesday. Thanks.